The first time my family erased me, it was over a wedding invitation I never received. I didn't know it then. I only knew that on a damp October morning, standing barefoot in my kitchen with a mug of coffee cooling in my hands, I opened social media and saw my younger sister smiling in a white lace dress, diamond ring, lifted toward the camera. The caption read, "Save the date. December wedding. Family only." Family only. My phone never rang. No message followed, no awkward explanation. Just silence, clean and deliberate like a door shut without a slam. Have you ever realized you were excluded not by accident but by design? That question stayed with me all day long after I shut the app and drove to work, long after I sat through meetings where men twice my age explained my own data back to me, long after I signed off on a proposal that would quietly save the company several $1,000,000 they would never credit to my name. I was 32 years old enough to know silence was never neutral. My name is Mara Ellison. And 2 months later at my sister's wedding, they would toast success built on my work while pretending I had never existed. What they didn't know was that the ground beneath them already belonged to me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The message finally came that evening, not from my sister Claire, but from my mother. Weddings at the Hawthorne estate. Formal. You can come if you want. No apology, no explanation, just an offer like an afterthought tossed across a table. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The Hawthorne estate, a historic property outside Charleston. Expensive, exclusive, the kind of place that required permits, investors, and discreet corporate backing to operate. I knew that place well. I was the reason it still existed. 3 years earlier, when the Hawthorne Trust was on the brink of foreclosure due to mismanagement and environmental violations, I had quietly acquired controlling interest through a shell partnership tied to a sustainability fund. I structured the rescue, rewrote the operational plan, and installed the waste and energy systems that made it eligible for preservation grants. My signature was on every approval. My name was on none of the plaques. My family had no idea. I typed back one word: I'll be there. Not because I wanted to celebrate Claire, not because I craved reconciliation, but because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk into a room where everyone assumes you don't belong and let them build the lie themselves. Claire and I had not always been enemies. We were close once in that lopsided way siblings are when one is expected to shine and the other is expected to accommodate. She was the golden one, cheer captain, honor roll, engaged by 28 to a man with a family firm and a future already paved. I was the inconvenient one, too quiet, too stubborn, the daughter who asked uncomfortable questions at Thanksgiving dinners, the one who left home at 20 after refusing to join my father's insurance business. My parents framed my independence as rebellion. Claire framed it as failure. By the time I moved into corporate sustainability consulting building systems, no one saw, but everyone relied on my family had already decided my story for me. Mara works in compliance. Something boring, she never stuck with anything. I let them believe it. The wedding invitation arrived by mail a week later. Generic, no personal note, my name misspelled. I pinned it to the refrigerator and went back to work. The weeks leading up to the wedding blurred into a familiar rhythm. Long hours, strategic calls, a late-night dinner with our legal counsel, where I finalized the final transfer of the Hawthorne Estate's operational authority into a new holding structure. The timing was deliberate. On paper, nothing would change until the end of the fiscal quarter. In practice, the estate now answered to me. I didn't plan to reveal that at the wedding. Not yet. Revenge, when done properly, is never loud at first. It's quiet. Administrative. Signed in ink no one notices until it's too late. 2 days before the ceremony, my brother Ethan called. First time in over a year. So he said, too casual, "You coming?" "Yes." A pause. "Good. Mom was worried it'd look bad if you didn't." There it was, not concern, optics. "Does Claire know?" I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. "She said she assumed you'd be busy." I smiled to myself. "Tell her I cleared my schedule." The morning of the wedding, I arrived early. Not to the ceremony, to the estate office. The staff recognized me immediately. They always did. To them, I wasn't a guest. I was the woman who approved payroll during a cash freeze. The one who sat with them during inspections and asked about their kids. "Ms. Ellison," the property manager said, startled but relieved. "We weren't expecting you." "I know," I said. "I just needed to confirm something." We reviewed the event permissions, the catering contract, the liquor license. One signature was missing. The final authorization for the private reception. It required the owner's consent. Mine. "I'll sign it," I said, but with one adjustment. His brow furrowed, of course. No access to the West Garden after sunset. Safety protocol. That's where the champagne toast is scheduled. I'm aware. He hesitated. Should I inform the bride's family? I shook my head. I'll handle it. I signed. Calm, precise. Then I left. By the time I changed into my dress that afternoon, a simple navy silk, I knew my mother would consider understated. The trap was already set. I wasn't going to ruin a wedding. I was going to let it reveal the truth. That night, as I drove back toward the estate, headlights cutting through the dusk, my phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Don't make today about you. I laughed softly. I never had to. They'd already done that themselves. And as I stepped onto the gravel drive of the Hawthorne estate, watching guests gather beneath lantern light, I knew something they didn't. By the end of the night, every toast they raised, every door they expected to open, every assumption they leaned on would belong to me. They just hadn't noticed yet. And that was the most satisfying part. The ceremony was flawless. Of course it was. Claire never tolerated imperfection when an audience was involved. White chairs lined the lawn in precise rows. The string quartet played something soft and expensive. The late afternoon sun hit the stone facade just right, casting everything in a golden glow meant to look effortless and ordained. I slipped into a seat near the back, not hiding, observing. My mother spotted me almost immediately. Her posture stiffened, lips pressing into a line before smoothing back into a practiced smile. She leaned toward my father and whispered something I couldn't hear, but I recognized the gesture. Damage control. My father didn't look at me. He rarely did unless he was disappointed or needing something. Ethan arrived moments later and sat beside me without a word. He smelled like cologne and nerves. You look fine, he said, as if surprised. Thank you, I replied. He nodded, eyes forward. We watched Claire walk down the aisle on my father's arm, radiant and triumphant, as if the world had always aligned itself to her stride. The man waiting for her, Daniel Harper, looked exactly as expected. Tall, well-groomed, the kind of man who spoke about legacy before he'd ever earned one. His family owned a regional development firm that specialized in luxury renovations and historic properties, including this one. That was the irony none of them caught. As vows were exchanged, my thoughts drifted not to bitterness, but to pattern. Claire had always believed the world responded to confidence alone, that if you spoke loudly enough, long enough, doors would open. She never noticed who built the doors, who reinforced the hinges, who kept them from collapsing under weight. I did. Applause rose, the kiss, the cheers. I clapped politely. After the ceremony, guests filtered toward the West Garden for cocktails, or tried to. A discreet staff member intercepted groups near the archway, redirecting them toward the East Terrace instead. Confusion flickered, then acceptance. The band adjusted. Drinks were rerouted. My mother frowned. Why aren't we using the garden? She asked a coordinator. The woman smiled apologetically. Updated access protocol, ma'am. Owner's directive. My mother blinked. Owner. The word landed softly, but I felt the ripple. She looked around, searching for someone to blame. Her eyes skimmed past me. Good. The reception unfolded with speeches and laughter and an undercurrent of irritation that never quite found a target. Daniel's father gave a long toast about legacy and stewardship, about restoring greatness and honoring history. He gestured broadly at the estate, praising its revival, as if it were a family achievement. I sipped my wine. Claire took the microphone next. She thanked her parents, her new in-laws, her bridesmaids. She thanked the venue. She did not thank me. I didn't expect her to. Then came dinner. I was seated at a peripheral table with distant relatives and business acquaintances, people who asked polite questions and didn't listen to the answers. So what do you do, Mara? One woman asked, mid-40s, pearls too tight around her neck. I manage systems, I said. Oh, she replied, interest fading immediately. Like it? Something like that. Across the room, I saw my mother leaning in toward Daniel's mother, laughing too loudly. I saw my father nodding along with men he'd just met, trying to sound relevant. And I saw Claire glowing, basking, convinced this day was the pinnacle. She was wrong. The first crack appeared during the main course. A staff supervisor approached the head table, speaking quietly to Daniel. His brow furrowed. Daniel leaned toward Claire. She stiffened. What's happening? My mother asked, already annoyed. Daniel cleared his throat and stood. Just a small logistical update, he said, forcing a smile. We'll be moving the champagne toast indoors this evening. A murmur swept through the room. But the garden, Claire said sharply. That was planned. Yes, he said, lowering his voice. Apparently there's been a change in authorization. My mother stood. I want to speak to whoever is in charge. The supervisor hesitated. The owner is present tonight, ma'am. Silence. My mother laughed once, sharp and dismissive. That's ridiculous. We booked this months ago. Yes, he said evenly. But final approvals are subject to ownership review. Her smile faltered. "Where is the owner?" Daniel's father asked, irritation creeping in. The supervisor glanced toward me. Not directly, just enough. I felt Ethan tense beside me. What he whispered. I took another sip of wine. Nothing yet. The speeches resumed, but the mood had shifted. Claire was distracted now, eyes scanning the room, sensing something was off. After dessert, the guests were ushered indoors for the toast. The grand hall glowed under chandeliers that I had personally approved the restoration for. Daniel lifted his glass. Before he could speak, a voice cut in. "Excuse me." It was the estate director, flanked by the legal counsel I worked with regularly. Before we continue, she said the owner would like to say a few words. The room froze. My mother turned slowly. Her gaze landed on me. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something like fear. I stood. Not abruptly, not dramatically. Just enough to be seen. "I won't take long," I said, voice steady. "Tonight isn't about me." Claire stared at me, mouth slightly open. But since my name has come up, I continued. I thought it best to clarify. I gestured gently around the room. This estate exists today because someone chose to invest when no one else would. Someone chose preservation over profit, sustainability over shortcuts. Daniel's father shifted uncomfortably. That someone, I said, was me. A beat. Then chaos. "That's not funny," my mother snapped. "It's not a joke," I replied. I met Claire's eyes. For the first time that night, she looked small. "I own the Hawthorne estate," I said, "through Ellison Environmental Holdings. I've owned it for 3 years. Daniel's face drained of color. His father whispered something urgent. My father stood. "This is inappropriate." "No," I said calmly. "What's inappropriate is pretending I don't exist until you need the room I built." The room buzzed. Phones came out. Whispers spread. "I didn't plan this," I added. "But since we're here, let me be clear. Tonight continues as planned. Drinks, music, celebration. No one is being punished." I paused. "Except illusions." I sat back down. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. Claire didn't look at me again. Daniel didn't either. But every assumption in that room had cracked. And I knew as the music resumed shakily and guests tried to pretend nothing had changed, that this was only the beginning. Because revealing the truth was never the revenge. What came next was, the night didn't end with shouting. That surprised them. It surprised me too. People like my family expect confrontation to explode to justify their version of events later. They expect tears or raised voices, something they can point to and say, "See, that's why we did what we did." I gave them nothing. The band played on. Guests drank more than they should have. Laughter returned thinner now, threaded with curiosity. Everyone pretended the interruption had been a quirky anecdote, not a fracture. Claire disappeared for nearly an hour. Daniel's mother cornered the estate director, whispering furiously. Daniel's father made 3 calls in quick succession, pacing near the bar. His voice clipped and urgent. My parents avoided me entirely. Ethan didn't. He sat beside me silent, staring into his glass. So he finally said, "You own this place." "Yes." "How long were you going to let us believe otherwise?" I thought about it, as long as it took. He nodded slowly. "That tracks." We watched Claire reappear, makeup retouched, smile reassembled. She took Daniel's arm and led him to the dance floor as if nothing had happened. But something had. I felt it in the way staff now looked at me openly, in the way people leaned toward my table, curiosity outweighing politeness. A woman from Daniel's firm approached. "I had no idea," she said, voice low. "That was impressive." "Thank you." She hesitated. "Will this affect the development partnership?" I smiled. "That depends." On what, she asked. "On whether the truth makes you uncomfortable," I replied. She swallowed and excused herself. By the time the reception ended, the lines had been redrawn. Not loudly, but clearly. My parents left early. Claire didn't say goodbye. Daniel didn't meet my eyes. Ethan lingered. "You could have warned us," he said. I shrugged. "You could have asked." He winced. "Fair." The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. Missed call, my mother. Then a text. "We need to talk. This was not the time or place." I left it unread. By 9, emails started arriving. Lawyers, consultants, Daniel's father requesting a meeting to clarify future collaboration. I forwarded them to my legal team. At 10, Claire called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. "What did you do?" she demanded. No greeting, no hesitation. I told the truth. "You humiliated me." I closed my eyes. "You erased me." "That's not the same thing." "It is," I said quietly. "You just didn't notice because you weren't the one disappearing." She scoffed. "You always do this. You make everything a statement." "No," I replied. "I make everything a system. You just walked into one." Silence. "You ruined my wedding," she said, voice cracking. "I saved it," I said. I could have shut it down entirely. She inhaled sharply. "You wouldn't." I did, I corrected, and I chose not to. That seemed to land. "What do you want?" she asked. There it was, the first honest question she'd ever asked me. I want you to stop pretending I'm less because my success doesn't look like yours." She laughed bitterly. "You think this changes anything?" "Yes," I said. "I think it already has." She hung up. At noon, my mother showed up at my office. Unannounced, pearls and all. The receptionist buzzed me uncertain. "Send her in," I said. She entered like she owned the space. Stopped short when she saw the glass walls, the city skyline beyond the quiet hum of people working with purpose. "You could have told us," she said, skipping pleasantries. "I did," I replied. "Years ago, you didn't listen." She sat. "You embarrassed the family." I leaned back. "You taught me presentation mattered more than truth. I learned well." Her lips thinned. "This isn't how things are done." "It is now." She folded her hands. "Daniel's father is furious. He feels misled." I raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. He never asked who owned the estate. He assumed." "That's different." "Only if you think assumptions are facts." She sighed, suddenly tired. "Why are you doing this?" I studied her face. The woman who raised me to be polite, to be small, to never make waves that couldn't be smoothed over later. "I'm done smoothing," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "You always wanted more than us." "No," I corrected. "I wanted more than silence." She stood abruptly. "This will have consequences." I smiled faintly. "So does everything worth doing." She left without another word. That afternoon, my legal counsel confirmed what I already suspected. Daniel Harper's firm had submitted an offer to acquire partial rights to the Hawthorne estate through a subsidiary. The offer was dated 2 weeks before the wedding. They had planned to use the marriage as leverage. They just hadn't known who held the leverage. I authorized a counteroffer. Not hostile, strategic. Terms that would require transparency, environmental compliance, labor protections, oversight. Terms they would hate. By evening, my inbox was full. By night, my phone rang again. "Unknown number." I answered. Mara Daniels' voice said, tense, controlled, "We need to talk." "Do we?" "Yes," he said. "This doesn't have to get ugly." I looked out at the city lights, steady and indifferent. "Oh," I replied, "it already is." And as I hung up, I felt it settle in my bones. This wasn't about a wedding anymore. It was about power. And I was done pretending I didn't have it. Daniel didn't call back that night. That told me more than any threat ever could. Men like him only disappear when they're recalculating, when the ground beneath their certainty shifts just enough to make them cautious. He wasn't angry yet. He was afraid of being exposed as unprepared. By morning, the silence had shape. My assistant slid a printed email onto my desk before I'd even taken my coat off. Subject line polite to the point of menace. Request for urgent discussion regarding Hawthorne Estate stakeholder alignment. Daniel's father. Carbon copied to 2 senior partners, one attorney and a development consultant I recognized from an environmental case 5 years earlier. He had argued then that compliance was a nuisance expense. I smiled and handed the page back. "Schedule it for Thursday," I said. "End of day." She nodded. "Conference room or virtual?" "In person," I said. "At the estate." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, then smoothed. "Understood." By noon, Claire's name was trending locally. Not because of the wedding, because of a leaked memo. Someone from Daniel's firm had anonymously sent a document to a regional business blog. It outlined a proposed acquisition strategy tied to family integration, complete with language about social positioning, optics, and consolidation through marriage. The blog framed it delicately, but the implication was clear. The wedding wasn't just a union, it was leverage. My phone buzzed. "Ethan, you see this?" he asked. "Yes." A pause. "Did you leak it?" "No." "But you're not surprised?" "No." He exhaled. "Claire's losing it." I pictured her pacing, phone clenched, realizing too late that the narrative she curated was unraveling without her consent. "I didn't do this to her," I said. "She walked into it." "That's easy for you to say." "Is it?" I asked. "Or is it just unfamiliar to hear?" He didn't answer. Thursday came quickly. The estate looked different in daylight, less romantic, more honest. The conference room overlooked the garden's long table, polished to a shine. I arrived early, set my folder down, and waited. They arrived together. Daniel, his father Richard, 2 partners, their attorney. Claire followed behind them, uninvited. She stopped short when she saw me at the head of the table. "You didn't tell me she'd be here," she hissed at Daniel. "I didn't know," he muttered. I stood. "Claire." "Mara," she said flatly. "So this is what you do now. Boardrooms and ambushes." "This isn't an ambush," I said calmly. "It's a meeting, one you're not required to attend." Richard cleared his throat. "Let's sit." We did. The first 10 minutes were procedural, statements of intent, expressions of disappointment, carefully worded concern. Then I spoke. "Before we discuss terms, I said I'd like to clarify something." I slid a document across the table. "Your firm began negotiations under the assumption that ownership of the Hawthorne estate was shared or transitional." I continued. "It is not." Daniel stiffened. I am the sole controlling owner, I said. There are no silent partners, no family trusts, no contingencies based on marriage. Richard leaned back. That's inconvenient. I'm sure, I replied. You understand, he said slowly, that this changes the valuation. It corrects it, I said. The attorney interjected. Ms. Ellison, with respect your actions at the wedding. We're legal, I said, and transparent. Public, he corrected. Yes, I said. Truth tends to be. Claire slammed her hand on the table. You planned this. I met her eyes. I planned to protect what I built. You could have told me, she said, voice shaking. You could have told me before I married into this. I softened my tone just slightly. You could have asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Daniel spoke. This doesn't have to destroy anything. Agreed, I said, which is why I've prepared a revised proposal. I slid another folder forward. Terms that would have been unthinkable to them a month ago. Oversight committees, public disclosures, environmental audits, labor guarantees, and one final clause. No development rights transferred through marital association. Silence. Richard scanned the page, jaw tightening. You're cutting us off at the knees. No, I said. I'm asking you to stand on your own. Daniel looked at Claire. She looked away. This undermines our entire growth strategy, Richard said. Then it wasn't sustainable to begin with, I replied. The attorney leaned in. If we walk away, then you walk, I said. The estate remains operational and profitable. I didn't mention the backup investors already lined up. I didn't need to. Claire stood abruptly. This is about punishing me. I shook my head. This is about boundaries. You're jealous, she snapped. You always were. The room went still. I took a breath. I wasn't jealous of you, Claire. I was invisible to you. She stared at me stunned. I stopped trying to be seen, I continued, and started building anyway. Daniel pushed his chair back slightly. We need time. Take it, I said. You have 7 days. They filed out slowly. Claire lingered. You didn't have to do it like this, she said quietly. I did, I replied, because this is the only language you respect. Her eyes filled, but no tears fell. I don't know who you are anymore. I looked at her, truly looked. You never did. She left. That evening, alone in the conference room, I watched the sun dip behind the trees. My phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line simple. Offer accepted. From one of the backup investors. I closed my eyes. The wedding had been the spark. This was the burn. And I knew now with a clarity that steadied me that whatever came next, I would not shrink to make anyone else comfortable again. The table had turned, and they were just beginning to feel it. The first thing that broke wasn't the deal. It was the illusion. By Monday morning, Daniel's firm issued a carefully worded statement about strategic realignment and mutual reevaluation of partnership priorities. The blog that had leaked the memo followed up with a sharper headline, one that used words like exposure and optics miscalculated. Claire didn't call. That silence was louder than her anger had ever been. At work, nothing slowed. If anything, the pace sharpened. When you step out of the shadow people have placed you in, you don't get a victory lap. You get scrutiny. My calendar filled with meetings that had nothing to do with Hawthorne on the surface, but everything to do with power beneath it. Invitations that once went unanswered were now phrased as opportunities. Old contacts resurfaced with sudden warmth. I took note of all of it. Because attention, like silence, is never neutral. On Wednesday, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. The area code was local, but the pause before the voice came on the line told me exactly who it was. Mara, my father said. He had never called me at work before. I have 10 minutes, I said. A beat. I won't take long. We exchanged nothing else. He didn't ask how I was. I didn't offer. I don't understand why you did this, he said finally. Which part, I asked. Exposing the family like that? You made us look foolish. No, I corrected. I let the truth exist where you couldn't control it. That's not how families work, he snapped. That's exactly how ours worked, I replied. You just didn't like it when the rules applied upward. He exhaled hard. Daniel's father called me. He says you're unreasonable. I smiled faintly. Of course he does. This affects Claire, my father continued. Her future. It affects her narrative, I said. Her future is hers to build. Silence. Then quieter, you could have come to us first. I leaned back in my chair. I did, for years. You were always too busy correcting me to hear. He didn't argue that. I raised you better than this, he said at last. The old line, the one meant to fold me back into place. You raised me to survive without help, I said. I just stopped pretending that was a flaw. He hung up without saying goodbye. That afternoon, Ethan showed up again. This time, he didn't hover, he sat. You were right, he said. I didn't respond. They never listen until it costs them something, he continued. I didn't want to see it. I studied his face. The tension there wasn't new. It was recognition. What do you want, Ethan? I asked. He hesitated. I want to stop being complicit. That surprised me. How? I asked. He swallowed. Daniel's firm is scrambling. There are internal emails circulating, not just about the estate, about other deals, other shortcuts. I held his gaze. Be careful. I know, he said, but if you're going to burn bridges, don't do it alone. I didn't answer right away. Ethan had always chosen safety over truth. This was new territory for him. Send me nothing, I said finally, not yet. He nodded, relieved and unsettled at once. That evening, I drove out of the city. Not to the estate, but farther north where the roads thinned and the houses grew quiet. I parked outside my grandmother's old home. She had died 5 years earlier. The house sat empty now, maintained by a trust my parents controlled, or thought they did. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell hit first. Wood polish and time. I walked through rooms heavy with memory, past the dining table where arguments were disguised as conversations, past the hallway where Claire's achievements were framed and mine were forgotten. In the back office, I opened the file cabinet. The folder was still there. My grandmother's will. She had been the only one who saw me clearly, the only one who never asked me to explain myself smaller. She left me something. Not money, not property. Authority. A controlling vote in the trust that managed several dormant assets, including mineral rights and land parcels my father had quietly leveraged for decades. I had never exercised it, until now. The next morning, my attorney filed the paperwork. No announcements, no drama, just a shift. By Friday, my parents' financial advisor requested a meeting. By Sunday, Claire finally texted. We need to talk, not about business, about us. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, Monday noon, my office. She arrived exactly on time. She looked different, less polished, tired. I didn't sleep, she said, sitting down. I believe you, I replied. She folded her hands. Daniel's firm is backing out. I know. They say it's temporary. I said nothing. They say it's because of optics, she continued. Because of you. I met her eyes. Because of choices. She laughed once brittle. You always twist things. No, I said. I untangle them. Her voice dropped. Did you ever love me? The question landed harder than I expected. Yes, I said. That's why I stayed quiet for so long. Tears welled. Then why didn't you protect me? I leaned forward. Because protecting you from consequences would have meant betraying myself. She wiped her face. I don't know how to live without the story I was promised. I softened. Neither did I. We sat in that truth for a moment. Then she straightened. Mom says you're trying to take everything. I smiled sadly. No, I'm taking responsibility. She shook her head. You think this ends well? I think it ends honestly, I said. That's not the same thing. She stood. I hope it was worth it. I watched her go. That night, an anonymous email landed in my inbox. Subject line, you should know. Attached were documents. Proof of Daniel's firm cutting corners. Environmental violations buried. Labor complaints settled quietly. It wasn't from Ethan. It was from inside the firm. The dam was cracking. I forwarded the files to my legal team, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt something like relief. Not triumph. Alignment. Because revenge isn't about destruction. It's about correction. And the system was finally correcting itself. The first subpoena arrived on a Tuesday morning. Not for me. For Daniel Harper. That distinction mattered more than anyone realized. I was reviewing a draft sustainability impact report when my attorney called voice-measured precise in the way lawyers are when something finally tips from theory into consequence. The State Environmental Board has opened a formal inquiry, she said, based on the documents you forwarded. I closed my eyes briefly. How serious? Serious enough that Daniel's firm won't be able to contain it internally. I nodded. Good. She hesitated. There's more. There always was. They're requesting cooperation from Ellison Environmental Holdings as a third-party consultant. You're not a target. You're a reference. That was the pivot. I wasn't the whistleblower in their eyes. I was the expert. Except, I said, with conditions. Of course. The investigation moved fast. Faster than Daniel expected. Faster than my parents understood. When institutions decide to protect themselves, they don't move cautiously. They move decisively. By Wednesday, Daniel's name had vanished from the firm's website. Not removed entirely, just relocated. A quiet demotion disguised as restructuring. Claire showed up at my office unannounced again. This time she didn't sit. You knew, she said, not an accusation, a realization. I suspected, I replied. You set this in motion. I didn't create their violations, I said evenly. I just stopped shielding them. Her voice cracked. He lied to me. Yes, I said, about more than business. She sank into the chair. Everyone's calling. Friends, sponsors, people who smiled at the wedding. I said nothing. They want statements, distance, damage control. She laughed hollowly. Apparently I'm radioactive now. I watched her carefully. This wasn't the sister who weaponized charm. This was someone encountering consequences without a script. "What are you going to do?" I asked. She looked up. "What did you do when you realized our family would never back you?" I considered the question. I stopped asking. She swallowed. "Daniel wants me to stand by him," she said. "He says this is temporary, that it'll blow over." "And you believe him?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "I don't know who I am without being chosen." There it was, the core wound. "Being chosen by someone who lies isn't safety," I said. "It's a delay." She nodded slowly as if committing the thought to memory. "Mom says you're enjoying this," she said. I almost laughed. Almost. "Tell her I'm busy," I said, with work she never thought mattered. Claire stood. "If I leave him, they'll blame you." "They already do," I replied. She paused at the door. "If I walk away, will you help me?" The question was raw, unprotected. "Yes," I said, "not because you're my sister, but because you're finally telling the truth." Her eyes filled again. This time she didn't wipe them away. She left without another word. That afternoon, my father called for the second time in a week. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. "Mara," he said, voice strained, "you need to understand. This is bigger than you. There are reputations involved." I deleted it. By Thursday, the story broke publicly. Not the wedding, not the family. The firm. A mid-level expose in a business journal, cautious but unmistakable. Environmental shortcuts, labor disputes, strategic partnerships built on misrepresentation. Daniel's name appeared twice. Claire's appeared nowhere. That omission was deliberate. By Friday, the state board requested an in-person briefing. At the estate. I accepted. The irony didn't escape me. The conference room filled again. This time with regulators, auditors, and compliance officers. No family, no champagne, just facts. I answered questions calmly, precisely. I provided documentation, historical context, systems diagrams. They listened. After 2 hours, the lead investigator closed her folder. "Ms. Ellison," she said, "we appreciate your cooperation." I nodded. "I appreciate accountability." She studied me. "You didn't have to come forward." "No," I agreed, but I had to stop pretending I didn't know. She smiled faintly. "That's rare." When they left, I stayed seated, staring out at the gardens. The estate was quiet now, stripped of performance, honest. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "He's out." That was all. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. Daniel Harper resigned that evening. Officially for personal reasons. Unofficially because the firm needed distance and he was expendable. Claire didn't answer my calls that night. I didn't push. Saturday morning, my mother arrived at my apartment. Not dressed for war this time. No pearls, no armor. She sat heavily on the couch. "You've destroyed us," she said softly. I made coffee, brought her a cup. "No," I said. I removed the cover. She stared at the steam. "Your grandmother would have hated this." I met her gaze. She taught me to tell the truth even when it costs. Her jaw tightened. "You always choose conflict." "I choose clarity," I said. "Conflict is what happens when people refuse it." She shook her head. "Claire is moving out." I nodded. "That's probably wise." "She doesn't know where she'll land." I sat across from her. Neither did I. For the first time, my mother looked at me without judgment. Just calculation. Loss. "Was any of this worth it?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. I thought of the years of silence, the invisible labor, the small humiliations that accumulated like dust. "Yes," I said finally, "because I can breathe." She left without arguing. That night, Claire called. "I left him," she said. Her voice was steady but thin. "I know," I replied. "I don't want to be like them," she said. "I don't want to trade truth for comfort." I closed my eyes. "Then don't." She exhaled. "I don't know who I am yet." "That's okay," I said. Neither did I when I started. After we hung up, I sat alone in the quiet. The system had turned. Not with fireworks, not with celebration, but with consequence. And as the dust settled, I realized something that surprised me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Because the real revenge was never about taking something from them. It was about taking myself back. Freedom doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives with space. The week after Daniel resigned, the noise finally died down. No new articles, no frantic calls, just a strange hollow quiet that settled in the places where adrenaline had lived. That was when the aftermath began. Claire moved into a short-term rental on the east side of the city. Somewhere neutral, she said. No memories in the walls, no expectations baked into the furniture. I didn't offer my couch. Not out of cruelty, but clarity. We were rebuilding something, and it couldn't start with dependency. Instead, I helped her in quieter ways. A referral to a therapist who didn't care about last names. A recommendation for a financial advisor who specialized in women leaving high-profile relationships. Introductions without commentary. She accepted them without protest. That alone told me how much she'd changed. At work, the requests multiplied. Regulatory boards asked for my input on new compliance frameworks. Advocacy groups wanted my name on panels. Corporations that once dismissed my emails now asked for guidance. I said no to most of it. Not because I didn't deserve the platform, but because I'd learned something important watching my family perform success. Visibility without boundaries is another kind of trap. Instead, I focused on what I'd been building quietly all along. The systems, the process, the long game. On Thursday, my grandmother's trust officially transferred controlling authority to me. My father's advisor called within the hour. "This creates instability," he said. "It creates honesty," I replied. He sighed. "Your parents are considering legal options." I smiled to myself. "Tell them to read the documents again." He didn't call back. That evening, Ethan came over with takeout and a bottle of wine we never opened. "I didn't think it would feel like this," he said, staring at the city through my window. Like what I asked. Like the ground shifting under me. I leaned against the counter. "That's what happens when you stop lying to yourself." He nodded. "I keep replaying things, the way we talked about you, the jokes." I didn't respond. "I should have said something," he said quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "You should have." He flinched, then nodded again. "I know." We sat in that truth without rushing to soften it. That night after he left, I walked through my apartment, slowly noticing details I'd once ignored. The absence of noise, the way my shoulders weren't tense. I slept deeply for the first time in months. The next morning, a new email waited in my inbox. From Daniel. I almost deleted it unread. "Almost. Mara," he wrote, "I owe you an apology, not just for the firm, but for how I treated you as an inconvenience instead of a stakeholder. I see now how wrong that was." I stared at the screen. Then I replied with a single sentence. "Apologies without accountability are just rehearsals." I blocked his address. By Saturday, my parents called a family meeting. The phrasing alone made me laugh. I declined. They showed up anyway. My father stood in my doorway, jaw set. My mother hovered just behind him. "We need to resolve this," he said. I stepped aside and let them in. They sat stiffly like guests afraid of breaking something. "You've changed the balance," my father said. "No," I replied. I revealed it. My mother clasped her hands. "People are asking questions." "Good. You don't understand what you've done to our standing," she said. I looked at her. "I understand exactly what I've done to mine." Silence stretched. Finally, my father spoke again. "What do you want from us?" The question was heavy with years of unspoken conditions. "I want you to stop using me as a footnote," I said. "And if you can't do that, I want distance." My mother's eyes filled. "You'd walk away from your own family?" I met her gaze steadily. "I already did. I'm just naming it now." They left an hour later without resolution. I didn't chase them. That afternoon, Claire came over. She looked lighter, still bruised but standing on her own feet. "I started a journal," she said, almost embarrassed. "I'm trying to figure out what's mine." I smiled. "That's a good start." She hesitated. "I don't expect forgiveness." "I'm not offering it," I said gently. "I'm offering honesty." She nodded. "That's enough." We sat together on the balcony as the sun dipped low. "I used to think you were angry all the time," she said. "I was," I admitted, "but not in the way you thought." She looked at me. "I don't want to compete with you anymore." "I never wanted competition," I said. "I wanted recognition." She exhaled. "I can give you that now." It wasn't an apology, but it was real. On Sunday evening, my legal team confirmed that the investigation into Daniel's firm would expand. More documents, more scrutiny. The system correcting itself layer by layer. I didn't celebrate. I cooked dinner, I watered the plants, I prepared for Monday. Because revenge doesn't end with collapse. It ends with construction. And as I stood at my window watching the city hum quietly below, I understood something I hadn't before. The most powerful thing I had taken from my family wasn't leverage. It was their ability to define me. That was gone. And it wasn't coming back. The apology came in pieces. Not from my parents, not even from Claire at first. It came from the world they trusted more than me. On Monday morning, my assistant forwarded a request from a national regulatory consortium asking me to lead a working group on ethical redevelopment. The language was careful, formal, and unmistakable. They wanted my framework. Not a quote, not a panel appearance, ownership of the process. I accepted without ceremony. Because this wasn't validation, it was responsibility. That same afternoon, a journalist called, one I respected. She'd covered labor rights for over 2 decades and didn't do fluff. "I'm not interested in the wedding," she said bluntly. "I'm interested in the systems you build and why they make powerful people uncomfortable." I agreed to a background conversation. No names, no family, just work. The article published 3 days later under a headline that made my phone light up for hours. Quiet Power. How invisible infrastructure shapes who really wins. My parents didn't mention it. Claire did. "I read it twice," she texted. "I didn't know that was you." I replied simply, "It always was." That evening, she came over with a bottle of cheap wine and no makeup. She kicked off her shoes and sat on the floor like she used to when we were kids. "I keep remembering things," she said. "Mom correcting you at dinner. Dad changing the subject when you talked." I stayed quiet. I thought that was normal, she continued. I thought that was love. She looked up at me. It wasn't, was it? No, I said. It was control dressed as concern. She nodded slowly. I married that pattern. Yes, I said gently, you did. She didn't cry. She didn't defend herself. That was new. The next morning, my mother called again. I answered this time. We're being audited, she said without preamble. I leaned against the counter. By whom? The trust. The advisor says the voting shift triggered a review. I closed my eyes. That's standard. You knew this would happen, she accused. Yes. Why didn't you warn us? I thought carefully before responding. Because warnings only work when people believe they're accountable. Silence. You've always been cold, she said finally. No, I replied. I learned to regulate. She hung up. 2 days later, the audit uncovered what I'd suspected for years. My father had leveraged trust assets to secure personal business loans. Not illegally. Just ethically murky. The kind of maneuver that relied on no one looking too closely. Until now. The advisor called me directly. This will require restructuring, he said carefully. Possibly restitution. I trust your judgment, I replied. He hesitated. Your parents won't see it that way. They don't have to, I said. They just have to comply. That night, Ethan came over again. They're furious, he said. Dad's saying you're dismantling everything he built. I smiled sadly. I'm correcting the parts that were built on silence. Ethan rubbed his face. I don't know how to stand in the middle anymore. You don't have to, I said. Pick a side or step away. He nodded. I think I'll step away. That was his growth. Friday evening, Claire called voice tight. They want me to make a statement, she said. About Daniel. About the firm. What do you want to say, I asked. That I didn't know, she said. That I was misled. That's true, I said, but incomplete. She exhaled. I also ignored signs. I liked the security. Yes, I said. That's also true. Silence. I don't want to protect lies anymore, she said. Even mine. Then tell the whole truth, I said, without blaming yourself for what you couldn't see at the time. She did. The statement was measured clear and honest. It didn't vilify Daniel. It didn't defend him either. It named choice, responsibility, distance. The reaction was mixed, but something shifted. People stopped calling her naive. They started calling her brave. That night, my mother showed up at my apartment again. She didn't sit. I don't recognize this family anymore, she said. I met her eyes. Neither do I. You've turned us into a cautionary tale. No, I replied. I stopped being the quiet footnote. Her voice trembled. You always wanted to prove us wrong. I shook my head. I wanted you to stop being right at my expense. She stared at me for a long time. Then softly, I don't know how to talk to you. I considered that. Then listen, I said, without planning your response. She nodded once, just once. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was the first honest moment we'd ever had. After she left, I stood by the window and watched the city lights blink on. I thought about revenge, how it's often painted as destruction, as humiliation, as spectacle. But the kind that lasts doesn't look like that. It looks like systems correcting themselves, like people forced to sit with the consequences of what they ignored, like silence finally speaking back. And as I turned off the lights and prepared for bed, I understood something clearly for the first time. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had simply stopped giving. The quiet didn't last. It never does when power rearranges itself. By the following week, the investigation widened. Not explosively, not with headlines screaming across every screen, but with steady pressure. The kind that makes people check their locks at night and reread old emails with new fear. Daniel called again. I didn't answer. His attorney tried next, then a consultant, then a mutual acquaintance who suddenly remembered my name. I declined them all, because when people only respect you once they're afraid, conversation becomes a negotiation. And I was done negotiating my dignity. On Wednesday morning, my parents' house went up for sale. Not publicly, quietly, off-market, Ethan told me. They say it's temporary, he said, just to create liquidity. I closed my eyes. The house wasn't just real estate. It was theater, a place designed to project stability while everything underneath stayed rigid and unexamined. Are they asking for help? I asked. He hesitated, not directly. That was my answer. At work, the regulatory group moved faster than expected. Draft policies turned into pilot programs. Pilot programs turned into mandates. My name appeared in footnotes, then acknowledgments, then requests for authorship. I accepted authorship because visibility isn't arrogance when it's earned, it's protection. One afternoon, as I was reviewing a compliance framework, my assistant knocked softly. There's a woman here to see you, she said. No appointment. She says it's personal. Name, I asked. She didn't give one. I nodded. Send her in. She was older than I expected. Late 60s, maybe. Well-dressed, but not trying to impress. Her posture was careful, like someone used to being overlooked. She sat slowly. I won't take much of your time, she said. I just wanted to thank you for what I asked. My husband worked maintenance at one of Daniel Harper's sites, she said. He reported mold issues. They ignored him. He got sick. My chest tightened. After the investigation opened, they reached out, she continued. Offered compensation. Apologies. Too late, but still. I nodded. I'm sorry for what you went through. She smiled faintly. You didn't do it for us, but it reached us anyway. After she left, I sat still for a long time. This was the part no one talked about. Revenge wasn't just personal. It rippled. That night, Claire called in tears. I thought I was prepared, she said. I wasn't. For what I asked. For how lonely honesty is, she whispered. I understood that too well. When you stop performing, I said you lose an audience. What's left is real. She sniffed. Mom won't speak to me. I exhaled slowly. She will. When control stops working. Claire was quiet. Do you hate me? She asked. The question cut deeper than I expected. No, I said honestly, but I don't protect you from consequences anymore. She nodded. That feels worse than hate. I know, I said. It also lasts longer. By Friday, Daniel was officially named in the investigation summary. Not criminally, professionally. The kind of stain that doesn't wash out. His firm issued another statement. This one colder. Distancing language. Responsibility shifted. The word former appeared next to his title. He texted me that night. You won. I stared at the screen. Then I typed back. This was never a game. I blocked him for good. The next morning, my father finally asked for a meeting. Neutral ground, his words. We met at a quiet restaurant halfway between our offices. No staff he knew, no stage. He looked older, not weaker, just exposed. I don't recognize the world anymore, he said after we ordered. I folded my hands. The world didn't change. The leverage did. He frowned. You always speak like this is a lesson. It is, I said. You just weren't the student before. He bristled. I built something. Yes, I said. And I built something too. You just didn't value it because you couldn't control it. Silence. I did what I thought was best, he said quietly. For you, I replied. Not for me. He looked down at his plate. Your mother says you've turned cold. I smiled faintly. She confuses calm with cruelty. He met my eyes. What do you want from us? There it was again. I want you to stop framing my success as betrayal, I said. And if you can't, I want distance without guilt. He nodded slowly. And if we can, then we start over, I said, as adults. He considered that. I don't know if your mother can, he said. I know, I replied. That's not mine to fix. We ate in silence. When we stood to leave, he hesitated. You were always stronger than we gave you credit for, he said. I held his gaze. I didn't need credit. I needed respect. He nodded once. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. That evening, alone in my apartment, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window. The city looked the same, but I didn't. The revenge wasn't loud, it wasn't cinematic, it was systemic. And as I watched the lights blink on one by one, I realized something that steadied me completely. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. And that meant the final chapter wasn't about what they lost. It was about what I refused to give back. The thing no one warns you about when you stop playing your assigned role is the grief. Not the loud kind, not the kind that demands witnesses or rituals, the quiet kind that shows up when you finally have space to feel what you spent years surviving. It hit me on a Tuesday evening unannounced. I was alone in my apartment, paperwork spread across the dining table, a glass of water untouched beside me. Outside, the city moved the way it always did. Cars, lights, lives intersecting and separating without ceremony. And suddenly I couldn't focus. Not because I was overwhelmed, because I wasn't. There was no crisis to manage, no family emergency, no call demanding I shrink smooth or save someone else from consequences. For the first time in my adult life, there was nothing pulling at me. The silence felt heavy. I pushed my chair back and stood pacing the room like I was waiting for something to happen. A call, a shoe to drop, some proof that peace was temporary. It didn't come. That's when I understood. I wasn't restless. I was grieving the version of myself who thought endurance was the same as love. The next morning, the final regulatory report landed. It was thorough, methodical, unemotional. Daniel Harper's professional reputation was effectively finished, not destroyed but diminished beyond recovery, the kind of outcome that follows someone quietly long after public attention moves on. Claire was not named. That was intentional. She called me as soon as she read it. They left me out, she said, disbelief and relief tangled in her voice. Yes, I replied, because you chose distance. She exhaled. I don't know how to thank you. You don't, I said. You live differently. There was a pause. I'm starting over, she said. Smaller place, new job, no connections. I smiled softly. That's not starting over. That's starting honestly. Later that day, my mother sent a message. Not a call, not a confrontation. A message. I don't know how to talk to you yet, but I'm trying to understand. I stared at the words longer than I wanted to admit. Then I replied, understanding doesn't start with control. Take your time. She didn't answer, and that was okay. At work, the pace shifted again. The emergency phase was over. Now came implementation. I led meetings where my voice wasn't questioned, reviewed proposals without being interrupted, signed off on initiatives that would outlive any one headline or family dispute. This was the part that mattered, not the exposure, the rebuild. On Thursday afternoon, Ethan stopped by one last time before leaving town. He'd accepted a job in another state. A clean break, he said. I needed to see who I am without the noise he admitted. I nodded. That takes courage. He hesitated at the door. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you. I met his eyes. Seeing late is still seeing. He smiled faintly. You changed everything. No, I corrected. I changed myself. Everything else followed. That night, I packed a small bag and drove north. To my grandmother's house. Not to claim it, not to sell it. To sit in it. I walked through rooms that once felt too small for me, touching door frames worn smooth by generations. I sat at the old kitchen table and listened to the quiet. This place had never demanded anything from me. It had simply held space. I slept there that night. Deep, dreamless. In the morning, I brewed coffee and stood by the window, watching light spill across the yard. I thought about revenge. How people imagine it as an end point, a victory lap. But real revenge doesn't end with someone else's fall. It ends when their opinion loses power over your decisions. I returned to the city by noon. At my desk, a single envelope waited. Handwritten address. Inside was a note from my mother. I spent years thinking love meant shaping you into something acceptable. I see now that all I did was teach you to disappear. I don't know how to fix that, but I'm willing to learn if you are. I folded the note carefully. No forgiveness yet, no absolution. But accountability had finally entered the room. That evening, I stood on my balcony and watched the sunset bleed into the skyline. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt settled. The revenge had already happened. Quietly, completely. What came next wasn't about proving anything. It was about choosing what to build when no one was watching. And for the first time, that choice belonged entirely to me. The call came on a Sunday morning. That alone told me it wasn't urgent in the way emergencies pretend to be. It was personal, emotional, the kind of call that waits until people are alone with their thoughts. It was my mother. I need to see you, she said. No preamble, no defense. About what I asked. About us, she replied. And about what I owe you. I paused. Old instincts stirred. The reflex to prepare to brace for revisionist history wrapped in vulnerability. But something in her voice was different, not softer, slower. Come to the house, she said. I'll make lunch. The house? I hadn't been there since the wedding fallout. Since everything I'd refused to carry finally dropped from my shoulders. I'll come, I said. But I'm not coming to be corrected. There was a quiet exhale on the other end, I know. When I arrived, the driveway was half empty. No second car, no neighbors' laughter drifting from the yard. The place felt smaller without performance. She met me at the door. No pearls, no pressed blouse. Just jeans and a sweater I recognized from years ago before she started dressing like a role instead of a person. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I'd once tried to explain myself and been told I was overthinking everything. She poured soup into 2 bowls, hands steady but deliberate. I've been replaying things she said, setting one in front of me. Moments I dismissed, things you said that I minimized. I didn't interrupt. I thought I was preparing you for the world, she continued. I thought making you tougher would protect you. I met her eyes. It didn't feel like protection. She nodded. It felt like control. Yes. She folded her hands. I was afraid of what you represented. That surprised me. Why, I asked. Because you didn't need permission, she said. You didn't need approval. And I'd spent my whole life believing that was dangerous. Her voice wavered, but she didn't stop. I married stability, she continued. I built a life around being chosen. When you walked away from that model, it felt like rejection. Of me. I let that settle. I punished you for it, she said quietly. The words sat between us heavy and undeniable. I don't need you to explain, I said. I needed you to see it. She nodded. I do now. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Not awkward, just unguarded. Your father won't say this, she added. But he's been afraid too. Afraid that if we acknowledged you, we'd have to acknowledge what we ignored. I didn't ask about him. That boundary was mine now. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. I don't think I've earned it. I appreciated that. What I want, she continued, is to stop pretending the past didn't happen. I set my spoon down. That's the only place we can start. She looked relieved, not absolved, relieved. After lunch, we walked through the house together. Not reminiscing, just observing. She pointed out the repairs that needed doing, the rooms she no longer used. I'm thinking of selling, she said. I nodded. That might be healthy. She smiled faintly. You always say things like that. I learned from experience, I replied. When I left, she hugged me. Not tightly, not possessively. Just enough. That night, Claire came over. She'd cut her hair, not drastically, just enough to look like someone who'd chosen herself without announcing it. "I talked to Mom," she said. "So did I replied. She smiled uncertain. It felt different. "Yes," I said, "because you're not trying to win anymore." She sat on the couch and looked around. "I envy this." "The quiet?" I asked. "The permission," she said. "You don't ask anymore." I considered that, I asked myself. She nodded. "I'm learning how." She hesitated. Daniel reached out again. I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't answer," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know." "Good," I said. "You don't owe him closure." She exhaled. "I used to think silence meant losing." "It means you're done," I said. Later alone, I reviewed the final drafts of the compliance framework we'd been building. It would roll out nationally next quarter. It would change how redevelopment projects were evaluated. No headlines, no credit parade, just impact. I signed my name, not because I needed it there, because I'd earned it. Before bed, I reread my grandmother's will. The margin note she'd written in her careful handwriting stood out. "You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to be clear." I turned off the light. Tomorrow would come, with work, with choices, with space. And for the first time, the future didn't feel like something I had to defend myself against. It felt like something I could shape, quietly, on my own terms. The last thing to change was the story I told myself. Not the one I shared in boardrooms or interviews, the private one. The one that whispered late at night when the noise was gone and there was no one left to perform for. For years, that story had been simple and cruel. Endure, prove, outlast. I didn't realize how heavy it was until I set it down. It happened on an ordinary morning. No calls, no crises, no family drama disguised as concern. Just sunlight spilling across my kitchen counter and the quiet hum of a city waking up. I stood there, coffee in hand, and felt something unfamiliar. Peace. Not relief, not victory. Peace without conditions. At work, the final compliance framework went live. States began adopting it. Developers complained quietly. Workers benefited loudly. The system did what it was designed to do. Correct behavior. I watched it unfold without needing to insert myself into the narrative. That was new too. Claire started her new job the same week. Entry level, no favors. She called me that night breathless and nervous and proud in a way I'd never heard before. "No one knows my last name," she said. "It's just me." I smiled. "That's a gift." She laughed. "I think I finally get you." "You don't have to," I replied. "You just have to live honestly." She paused. "Thank you for not rescuing me." "You rescued yourself," I said, and meant it. My mother sent a message a few days later, short, direct. "I'm starting therapy. I don't want to repeat this." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "That's accountability. I respect it." She sent back a single word. "Thank you." It wasn't forgiveness. It was effort. That was enough. My father didn't reach out again. Not yet, maybe not ever. And for the first time, that didn't feel like loss. It felt like clarity. One afternoon, as I was packing up to leave the office, my assistant asked a question she'd clearly been holding for a while. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," I said. She hesitated. "How did you know when to stop trying to be seen by people who didn't want to look?" I considered that carefully. When I realized being unseen by them didn't mean I was invisible, I said, "It just meant they weren't my audience." She nodded, absorbing it like a truth she'd been waiting to hear. That night, I went back to my grandmother's house one last time before listing it for sale. Not out of sadness, out of gratitude. I walked through each room, slowly touching the walls, remembering the woman who had taught me without speeches or demands. In the backyard under the old tree she used to sit beneath. I paused. I didn't need to say goodbye. Some places don't leave you, they just release you. Back in the city, life settled into a rhythm that didn't revolve around reaction. Work, friends, quiet evenings, long walks where my mind didn't replay old conversations or rehearse future defenses. The need to prove had faded. So had the need to punish. That's the thing about real revenge. At some point, it stops being about them entirely. It becomes about what you refuse to carry forward. I never confronted Daniel again. I never corrected strangers who assumed my success was sudden. I never explained myself to people who hadn't earned the explanation. I simply lived. And that was the most disruptive thing I could have done. On the anniversary of the wedding a year later, Claire and I met for coffee. No tension, no unspoken scores. She raised her cup, to rebuilding. I clinked mine gently against hers, to choosing better. She smiled. "Do you ever miss the fight?" I thought about it, about the adrenaline, the sharpness, the clarity that comes from opposition. "No," I said. "I don't miss being angry enough to survive." She nodded, understanding more than she ever had before. That evening, alone again, I sat at my desk and wrote something I hadn't planned to share publicly, but knew would reach the right people. Not a manifesto, not a victory speech, Just the truth. That sometimes the people who hurt you the most aren't villains. They're afraid. And that fear doesn't excuse the harm, but it does explain why they fight your growth instead of celebrating it. That you don't owe anyone access to the version of you they tried to limit. That dignity isn't something you demand. It's something you stop bargaining away. When I finished, I didn't feel exposed. I felt complete. If you're listening to this and you've ever been erased in a room you helped build, if your family dismissed your work, minimized your dreams, or only valued you when you stayed small, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't need their permission to step forward. You don't need their applause to be legitimate. And you don't need revenge that looks like destruction to reclaim your power. Sometimes the most profound payback is living well without explanation. If this story resonated with you, if you've lived any version of it, I'd love to hear from you. Share your experience in the comments. Let others know they're not alone. And if you want more stories about justice, dignity, and the quiet ways people take their lives back, remember to subscribe, and stay with this channel. Someone out there needs the reminder you just heard. Take care of yourself and keep choosing who you are.